Why is always a bad decision to pay the things that you are going to buy in installments, to pay finance? Out of curiosity, I like to inform you guys about something. Here in Brazil, um, we can pay for things with a credit card without interest in a lot of situations. It's not every situation. And it's not something that the credit card does. It's something that the stores, the shops, they do. I believe that it's a kind of adaptation that that the market here in Brazil made to the reality of the population. Because the situation here is this: the interest of the credit card is very high. So it's almost impossible for you to pay less than the entire amount of your credit card bill every month. So because of that, I believe that because of the credit card companies, they avoid to offer credit, or the credit that they offer for Brazilian people is with this high interest tax. Little by little, Brazilian stores, the economy in general, start to offer this kind of payment without interest, with zero interest. In many situations, you can pay in 12 months, 10 months, 6 months. It's different for each thing that you are going to buy in each different store. And now it's something that it's spread around all the Brazilian economy. So just an interesting fact that I want to share with you. But why paying things finance is the worst option? I believe that if we think this right, we are going to realize that one of the most important things is this: we are robbing, we are stealing um, the freedom of our money in the future. We are making a compromise for our money in the future. For example, in the future, you are going to receive, let's say that you receive 5,000 per month. If you have to pay in general, for example, 1,500 in payments, credit card, mortgage, everything, then your money in the future is already compromised. So it make more difficult for you to take advantage of the compound interest. Actually, this interest is going to work against you. That is what is going to happen. And it's going to happen in US. In Brazil, it's much worse, much worse. I was the last construction that I finished. I had to sell my car to finish the construction, and then because of that, after I finished the construction, I wanted to buy a new car, and I bought a car finance. I know that I shouldn't do it, but I want to be honest with you and I want to tell you everything. So I'm telling you the truth. I financed the car and I financed it in 36 times, 36 months. And I start to pay, but in my mind, I already planned to pay as fast as I could. And that's what I did. Actually, I paid everything in 10 months. But what I was doing was that I remember that the price of the monthly payment was 1,651 reais, which is something like $400, something like that. All right. And then I was paying. And in Brazil, the interest rates are much higher than in the United States. So take a look at that. I first month I called to the bank because I want to pay the first payment and the last payment. And remember, the amount of the payment was 1,651 reais. All right. So I called the bank and asked them to send me the last payment for me to pay. And the last payment reduced from this value for nine, nine, 998 reais. So less than 1,000. The payment, normal payment was more than 1,500, more than 1,600. And I reduced it for less than 1,000 reais, which is huge. So when you do things like this, you are able to understand how much paying things in payments, installments, paying monthly payments is not good for you, especially here in Brazil. I believe that this happens in the United States too. But in United States, I believe that as you have access to credit that is less aggressive than the credit that we have here in Brazil, you do it in a more automatic way. It's easier for you to take credit because the interest rate is less. Here in Brazil, it's crazy. But don't take me wrong, it's crazy, but everybody does it. Everybody here. It's something that is difficult for me even to understand. Because for me, every time that I finance a car, which I did a few times in my life, most of the cars that I own, I pay them in cash. But the few times that I did it, it hurt me. It hurts me. Wasn't good for me. But the reality is that Brazilian people finance cars a lot. But as I was saying, maybe in the United States, the trap of financing is more subtle. It's not such a thing as is in Brazil. In Brazil, financing, I think that in Brazil it's easier to convince people not to finance, because the interest rates are so high that it's um, it's easier to convince people. But on the other hand, Brazilian people, we make so much money, so little money, so much money, huh? So little money that for us here, in many situations, people in general, they have to finance because there is no other way. For example, United States, you guys have there the bidder cars, those cars that you buy cheap to when you don't have much money to buy a car, or when you don't want to finance, or when you want to invest in other things and want to have a car to go from point A to point B. In Brazil, we have these cars, yes, but for us here, those cars are much more expensive because as things here are more difficult, as cars here are more expensive, new cars, and it's difficult for Brazilian people to buy new cars because of the interest rate and because of the price of the cars. What happens is this: the price of the used cars and even of the bidder cars are still high, because the prices of the cars here, they they drop in a slower way. It's not as fast as in US. In US, for example, a 10-year-old car, I believe that is a very cheap car. In Brazil, a 10-year-old car is not as cheap as in US, because people here, they value used cars because they don't have much money, so they need to value the car, you know. But it's interesting to realize what happens with you, because you have two kinds of interest. You have the kind of interest that you pay to the bank, that usually is much more, and you have the interest that you receive from stocks, from the valuation of the stocks, the evaluation of the stocks, from ETFs, from investments. You receive a tax, and in general, this tax is much less than the tax that we pay in general. And because of that, to take advantage the compound interest, to be able to see the compound interest, takes time. And because it takes time, in some occasions takes more than, let's say, 10 years or something like that. And because it takes time, in many situations, it's difficult for people to realize that, because you tell them, and the reality is that maybe they are going to believe you. But the truth is, if they can't see it, if they can't feel it, they are not going to really believe. You know, some things like interest rates, for example, you are only able to really believe in them when you are able to see and feel it in your real life, you know. Only then you are going to believe. And that's why it's difficult. That's why it's hard, because you have to invest for years until you start to see the compound interest showing its strength in your investments. But there is no other way. What you should do, if you didn't start yet, would be to start right now. All right, my friends, that is all that I have for you today. Thank you all for tuning in, and I see you in the next video.